Hi, I've made a new channel called Lunala Tales. On this channel, I'll upload the stories you ask for. Just comment below what kind of story you want, and I'll make it here on Lunala Tales. The link is in the description. Subscribe now, and tell me what story you want next. The first mistake the alien slavers made was laughing when they chained Lila Voss. It was the kind of laugh born from greed and stupidity, ringing through the cargo bay of their rust-covered freighter as they admired their prize. The second mistake was assuming she was helpless, that the quiet human girl glaring at them with those unshaken green eyes was afraid. She was not. She was counting. Counting how many of them there were, counting how many guns pointed her way, counting the seconds until someone realized what a monumental disaster they had just set in motion. But the worst mistake, the one that would shatter the galaxy's peace like glass, was that they never checked her name until it was far too late. The leader of the slavers, a three-eyed brute named Kargath, stood with his clawed hands on his hips, grinning through broken tusks as his crew argued over who would get the largest cut from selling her. Their voices echoed in the metal chamber, a chorus of greed and idiocy, while Lila sat chained to a wall, watching with the kind of calm usually reserved for people who know something everyone else doesn't. One of the younger slavers, a scrawny creature with trembling antennae, finally spoke over the noise. "We should run her a dent," he said, holding up the scanner nervously. "What if she's, someone important?" Kargath barked a laugh so loud it rattled the pipes overhead. "Look at her. Some settler brat from the edge of nowhere. No one's coming for her. Run it if it makes you sleep better, but we got ourselves a fat ransom no matter what." Lila tilted her head, just slightly, as if curious how long it would take them to realize the joke wasn't on her. The scanner beeped. The slaver holding it frowned, adjusted it, then frowned deeper. His mandibles clicked nervously. He checked again. Boss," he said slowly, voice cracking. "You might want to see this." Kargath stumped over, snatching the scanner from his hands. His three eyes scanned the name, the birth records, the family line. Then he froze. His mouth shut. The grin vanished. For a long, heavy moment, the only sound was the low hum of the ship's engines. "Boss?" another slaver asked. Kargath read the name again, as if hoping it would change. It did not. His hands trembled. The crew waited. Finally, in a voice that had lost every ounce of swagger, Kargath whispered, "Voss. Lila Voss." The room went silent. Someone dropped a wrench. The younger slaver's antennae quivered violently. As in, Kaelin Voss. Kargath turned slowly toward the chained girl. She sat there with the faintest trace of a smile tugging at her mouth. Every slaver in the room suddenly looked like they'd swallowed something sharp. One of them muttered, almost to himself, "But his just a story. A war ghost. Right? He retired after the war." "Retired?" Kargath snapped, his voice climbing toward panic. "You think Kaelin Voss retires? You think the man who ended the siege of Thala, who burned the Drakari Armada out of orbit, who walked into the Senate chamber with the severed head of a warlord to negotiate peace, retires?" The crew shifted nervously, muttering curses in half a dozen languages. Everyone knew the stories. The war hero turned legend. The man who won by thinking 10 moves ahead of everyone else, by being willing to do what no one else would. Some called him savior. Most just called him terrifying. And now his daughter sat chained to their wall. The youngest slaver let out a high-pitched squeak. "Maybe he'll pay us to get her back." "Pay?" Kargath spun on him, eyes blazing. "Kaelin Voss doesn't pay. Kaelin Voss doesn't bargain. Kaelin Voss erases." The panic spread like fire. One slaver was already yanking at the chains holding Lila, another was shouting about dumping her somewhere safe before Kaelin found out. Lila watched them with cool amusement, though her heart thudded a little faster now. She'd grown up hearing the same stories, after all. Some were true. Some were worse than the truth. But there was one thing she knew for certain: her father didn't bluff. The ship shuddered as someone fumbled with the engines, shouting about getting out of this sector before Kaelin's fleet showed up to turn them all into space dust. Kargath grabbed Lila by the arm, dragging her close. Listen, girl, he growled, though the edge of fear cracked his voice. You tell your father this was a mistake. We didn't mean nothing by it. He doesn't have to come looking. We'll let you go. No harm done. Lila tilted her head again, that same faint smile playing at her lips. Oh, she said softly. He's already coming. The words landed like a bomb. One slaver cursed so loud it echoed down the corridor. Another dropped his blaster, hands shaking. The ship's lights flickered as the engines roared to life, the freighter lurching forward. But it was already too late. Because somewhere far beyond the stars, on a warship painted black as a funeral shroud, a man named Kalen Voss had just received the distress signal his daughter had managed to trigger before they chained her. And when Kalen Voss came for you, there was nowhere in the galaxy you could hide. Kargath had seen wars before. He had watched planets burn, watched fleets tear each other apart in the silence of space, watched men beg for mercy that never came. But nothing he had seen in all his years as a slaver terrified him as much as the name he had just read on that scanner. Lila Voss. The daughter of Kalen Voss. It was a name that could hollow out entire armies with nothing but the weight of its reputation. And now she was chained on his ship, staring at him like she was waiting for the executioner's clock to strike midnight. He paced the length of the cargo bay, 3 eyes darting between the girl and his crew, muttering curses under his breath. The slavers argued in frantic bursts, their words colliding with one another in 6 languages. Some demanded they set her free immediately. Others said they should use her for leverage. A few greedy fools still thought they could make a fortune selling her to one of Kalen's many enemies. That last suggestion nearly got one of them shot by Kargath himself. You think anyone who buys her will protect us when he comes? Kargath roared at the group. You think there is a single warlord in this galaxy who will stand between Kalen Voss and the people stupid enough to kidnap his only daughter? No. They will give us up the moment he shows his face. They will run so fast they will leave burn marks on the floor. A short, squat slaver with oily skin spoke up from the corner. Maybe he won't come. Maybe he doesn't care anymore. He disappeared after the war, didn't he? Maybe he's old now. Weak. The silence that followed was almost painful. Even the ship's engines seemed to hum quieter, as if the very idea of Kalen Voss being weak was enough to make the universe pause out of disbelief. Lila finally spoke for the first time since the chaos began. Her voice was calm, soft, but it carried through the room like a blade cutting air. You think my father gets weak, she said slowly. You haven't been paying attention. Every eye turned to her. The girl chained to the wall did not look scared. She looked like someone watching a storm rolling toward them, fully aware there was no shelter big enough to hide in. The young slaver with the trembling antennae shuffled forward, wringing his hands. We could contact him, he suggested nervously. Tell him it was an accident. That we didn't know. Maybe he'll understand. Kargath spun on him so fast the smaller slaver flinched. Understand? Kalen Voss doesn't understand. He doesn't forgive. He doesn't even threaten. He just arrives. And then people disappear. Whole crews. Whole cities. Do you want to disappear? The young slaver shook his head so violently his antennae smacked together. Meanwhile Lila watched them with that same faint, unreadable smile. In truth she had no idea yet what her father would do. She hadn't seen him in over a year, not since she left the safety of his heavily guarded estate to travel the outer colonies. They had argued about it, of course. Kalen had wanted her safe. Lila had wanted freedom. She wanted to see the galaxy without bodyguards hovering at every corner, wanted to prove she wasn't just the daughter of a legend. That argument had ended with him watching her leave in silence, his jaw tight, his eyes unreadable. Now, chained in the hold of a panicking slaver ship, she wondered if maybe he had been right. The freighter lurched as someone pushed the engines harder, burning across the star lanes toward the nearest neutral port. The crew scrambled between stations, half of them preparing to dump her and run, the other half muttering about ransoms and fortunes and foolish dreams of outsmarting a man known for never losing. Kargath gathered his officers in the corner, his voice a low growl as he tried to regain control. We release her, maybe he spares us. We keep her, we are dead. Simple as that. But if we sell her to the syndicate, one argued, they might protect us. Kargath slammed a fist into the wall so hard the metal dented. The syndicate will hand us to Voss the second he shows up. No one crosses that man and lives. Not smugglers. Not pirates. Not the syndicate. Not even the Senate. You think we'll be the first? The officers fell silent. Even the greedy ones could see the truth now. But before any decision could be made, one of the deckhands stumbled into the room, eyes wide, skin pale. You better see this, he stammered, pointing toward the ship's comm screen. They followed him to the control deck where the long-range scanners flickered with incoming transmissions. Not one. Not two. Dozens. The ship's computers struggled to process them all. Distress calls. Reports. Rumors spreading like wildfire across the trade networks. The daughter of Kalen Voss has been taken. The words rippled outward from system to system, faster than light, faster than reason. Traders whispered it in bars. Pirates shouted it across encrypted channels. Warlords cursed in disbelief from their thrones of bone and steel. And every single one of them had the same reaction. Kalen Voss would come. The only question was how much of the galaxy would burn before he was done. Back on the slaver freighter, panic settled over the crew like a suffocating fog. Some began strapping into escape pods already, muttering about cutting their losses. Others begged Kargath to contact Kalen directly, to throw themselves on his mercy before he arrived. But Kargath knew better. Kalen Voss was not the kind of man you called. He was the kind of man who arrived without warning. And somewhere deep inside the ship, chained but calm, Lila Voss closed her eyes and listened to the frantic footsteps echoing through the corridors. She knew her father well enough to understand one thing. He was already on his way. And when Kalen Voss came for someone, there were no negotiations. Only endings. The warship Retribution had been silent for nearly a year, anchored above a desolate moon far from the busy lanes of the galaxy. Its black hull swallowed the starlight, a predator lurking in the dark. Most believed its captain had retired, leaving behind only the legend of Kalen Voss. Then the distress signal came through, a single coded burst carrying only 4 words. They have taken Lila. Kalen stood on the command deck as the message ended, his eyes locked on the pulsing icon marking its source. He did not speak for several seconds. He simply stared. His crew shifted uneasily around him, veterans of wars who had followed him through fire and vacuum alike, and yet even they felt the temperature drop when his jaw tightened. The helmsman finally broke the silence. "Orders, sir." Kalen's voice was low, steady, the same voice he had used to order orbital bombardments and ceasefires alike. "Trace the signal. Plot the fastest intercept course." "Already done," the helmsman said, fingers trembling over the controls. Kalen turned away, his black coat sweeping behind him as he left the deck. He paused only long enough to speak to his second-in-command, a scarred woman named Rhea who had once commanded fleets of her own before swearing loyalty to him. "Ready the fleet," he said. "Full strength." Rhea hesitated. "All of it." Kalen looked at her, and that was answer enough. Within minutes, the quiet moon erupted with movement as the Retribution and its sister ships powered up, engines glowing like furious suns. Across the galaxy, anyone watching the long-range scans would see the same terrifying sight. The fleet of Kalen Voss, dormant for a year, roaring to life like some ancient beast stirring from its slumber. News of the mobilization spread almost as fast as the news of the kidnapping itself. In the shadowy halls of the Senate, nervous politicians whispered about what Kalen might do if provoked. In the smoky dens of the syndicate, smugglers and assassins placed frantic bets on how many hours the slavers had left to live. And in the fortress palaces of the warlords who still remembered the last galactic conflict, old enemies of Kalen Voss smiled sharp and ugly smiles. Because for the first time in years, the great commander had been given a reason to fight again. The slaver crew had no idea yet how far the news had spread. They only knew panic. Lila could hear it in every shouted order, every slammed door, every frantic curse echoing through the ship's metal corridors. They had jumped to a neutral system now, hoping to hide among the thousands of freighters that passed through its trade routes every day. But even the younger slavers could tell it was a fool's hope. Kalen Voss did not need to search. He would already know. In the cargo bay, 2 slavers were arguing in heated whispers. "We dump her now," one hissed, eyes darting toward Lila's chained figure. "Stick her in an escape pod, set it drifting. He finds her, he spares us." "He will not spare us," the other growled. "You do not kidnap the daughter of Kalen Voss and live. Even if she walks away unharmed, he will come for us. You think he leaves loose ends?" The first slaver swallowed hard. Everyone knew the stories. Kalen Voss left no loose ends. But a third voice joined them, low and sly. It belonged to a slaver named Brask, a man with too many knives and too much ambition. "Not if we sell her first," he said. The others stared at him. Brask leaned closer, his grin sharp as broken glass. "Kalen has enemies. People who would pay fortunes to have his daughter. The syndicate. The warlords. Maybe even the Senate itself. Sell her to them, and when Kalen comes, they are the ones standing in his path, not us. He burns them first. We vanish rich." The other 2 slavers exchanged uneasy looks. It was a dangerous plan. A stupid plan. But greed has a way of sounding clever when spoken with enough confidence. Lila listened without comment, her face unreadable. Inside, though, she felt the first flicker of something dangerous. Because she recognized the truth in Brask's words. Her father's enemies would pay for her. And they would die for it. Meanwhile, far across the stars, those same enemies were already moving. On the crimson world of Varos, the warlord Drenkor slammed his fist onto a war table when he heard the news. Kalen Voss, the man who had shattered his fleets and left him with the scar that twisted half his face, was marching to war again. And this time, there was bait to be used. In the Senate, whispers curled like smoke through marble halls as politicians remembered how much power Kalen still held in the eyes of the people. If he went too far, if he burned too much in his path, they could use it against him. Perhaps even end him. And in the floating fortress of the syndicate, its shadowy leaders leaned forward with cold interest. A daughter was leverage. Leverage was profit. Back on the slaver ship, Brask's plan spread like a sickness. Half the crew wanted to hand Lila to the syndicate now, before Kalen arrived. The other half wanted to run, to scatter into the outer systems and pray the legend did not find them. Kargath tried to hold them together, but command slipped through his claws like sand. Lila watched it all with the same quiet calm. Because she understood something they did not. Her father would not care who held her. Slavers. Syndicate. Warlords. Senate. It did not matter. When Kalen Voss came, he would burn through all of them like paper before flame. And he was already coming. Aboard the Retribution, Rear approached Kalen on the command deck as the fleet cut through hyperspace toward the slaver ship's last known position. "Sir," she said carefully, "we have reports the Syndicate is moving ships into the sector. Warlord Corps 2. Even the Senate is mobilizing security fleets." Kalen studied the star map, his face carved from stone. "Let them come." Rear hesitated. This could start another war. Kalen finally turned, his eyes cold as the void outside. "Then let it." The fleet streaked onward, engines blazing, a storm gathering speed. And aboard the slaver freighter, as factions argued and plans splintered, Lila Voss sat chained in the corner, her mind already working, already calculating, already preparing. Because if there was one thing her father had taught her, it was this. Survival was not enough. Victory was what mattered. The slaver freighter had become a cage of panic and betrayal. Its corridors rang with shouted arguments as the crew split into factions. Some wanted to hand Lila Voss to the Syndicate immediately, convinced that only a powerful shield of allies could protect them from her father's wrath. Others wanted to abandon her in an escape pod and flee into the uncharted sectors, hoping Kalen Voss would be too busy rescuing his daughter to hunt them down. A few stubborn voices, led by Kargath, still demanded they keep her alive and unharmed as a bargaining chip. But even Kargath's authority was cracking as fear gnawed at his crew's sanity. Brask, the slaver with the knives and ambition, moved among them like a shadow feeding the fire. He whispered promises of wealth to the greedy, survival to the cowards, revenge to those with grudges against Kalen Voss. His words slithered through the halls until half the ship was secretly loyal to him instead of Kargath. Brask had no intention of facing Kalen Voss directly. He planned to sell the girl, vanish into the outer sectors with syndicate gold, and let others burn in the war that followed. Lila watched all of it with the same calm she had carried since the moment they chained her. But behind her steady eyes, her mind worked quickly, weighing every word, every argument, every fracture forming among her captors. Her father had taught her to read battlefields, and this ship was a battlefield now. Fear had cracked its walls. Greed was widening those cracks. Soon, the whole thing would break apart. The break came faster than she expected. It started when two armed slavers stormed into the cargo bay where she was kept, their weapons raised not at her but at Kargath himself. The leader spun toward them with a snarl, his three eyes blazing, but Brask stepped in behind them with half a dozen more at his back. "This is over, Kargath," Brask said, his grin sharp as a blade. "You are going to get us all killed. The syndicate will pay for her. They can stand against Voss. We sell her, we live. Simple math." "Simple math," Kargath roared. "You think the syndicate can protect you from Kalen Voss? You think anyone can? He will come through them like fire through paper, and then he will find you hiding under whatever rock you crawl to next." Brask shrugged, knives gleaming on his belt. "Better to be rich when he comes for us than broke." The two sides erupted in shouting, weapons raised, fingers trembling on triggers. The crew split in two, one half behind Kargath, the other behind Brask, faces twisted with fear and greed. Lila spoke before the shooting could start. "If you give me to the syndicate," she said, her voice cutting through the noise, "my father will burn them first. But he will save you for last. He will make sure you have time to watch it coming. Do you want to know why?" The room froze. Every eye turned toward her. "Because my father believes in consequences," she said softly. "And he always delivers them himself." For a moment, no one moved. Some of Brask's followers shifted uneasily, doubt flickering in their eyes. Kargath seized the moment, snarling at them to stand down. But Brask was faster. With a single sharp gesture, he signaled his men. The mutiny exploded in a storm of shouting and gunfire. Blaster bolts scorched the walls, crew members dived for cover, and the air filled with smoke and screams. Kargath bellowed orders, firing back as his loyalists scrambled to hold the bay. Brask's rebels surged forward, forcing them back step by step. In the chaos, one of Brask's men grabbed Lila, dragging her toward the hangar where a waiting shuttle could carry her to the syndicate. But Lila had been waiting for this. As they pulled her through the smoke, she twisted suddenly, slamming her captor's arm against the doorframe. Pain made him drop his blaster, and Lila snatched it before he could recover. A single shot dropped him, and she vanished into the maze of corridors before anyone could stop her. The freighter became a war zone. Brask's forces seized the engine room while Kargath's loyalists fell back toward the bridge. Fires burned in two sections where stray shots had ruptured coolant lines. The ship lurched violently as its stabilizers failed, sending crew tumbling through smoke-filled hallways. Lila moved through the chaos like a ghost, keeping low, gripping the stolen blaster in shaking hands. She had no illusions about her father arriving in time to save her if Brask handed her to the syndicate. She had to stay free, had to stay out of their hands until Kalen came. On the bridge, Kargath fought like a cornered beast, roaring orders as Brask's rebels closed in. His three eyes blazed with fury, but even he could see the battle slipping away. Too many had turned on him. Too many feared Kalen Voss less than they wanted syndicate gold. When Brask himself finally stepped onto the bridge, flanked by his armed followers, Kargath charged him with a roar. The fight was short and brutal. Brask's knives flashed, and Kargath fell with a sound that silenced the bridge. Brask stood over the body, chest heaving, grin wide. "Get the girl," he snapped. "We deliver her to the syndicate now. Before Voss arrives." But Voss was already on his way. Far across the stars, the Retribution streaked through hyperspace with the rest of Kalen's fleet close behind. On the command deck, Rhea read the latest reports with grim precision. Syndicate ships were moving into the same sector. Warlord Corps' fleet too. Even Senate security forces were converging, claiming they meant to keep the peace. But everyone knew better. This was not about peace. This was about Kalen Voss. About his daughter. About what he would do when he arrived. On the slaver freighter, Brask ordered his rebels to lock down the ship, sealing out what remained of Kargatha's loyalists. The engines turned toward Syndicate space. Smoke still poured from ruptured sections, bodies still lay cooling in the halls, but the ship obeyed. Only Lila Voss remained beyond Brask's reach, vanishing deeper into the freighter's shadows as it jumped toward a fate none of them truly understood. Because the storm was coming closer with every passing second, and there would be no shelter when it hit. The slaver freighter tore out of hyperspace on a trail of smoke and betrayal, its hull scorched from the mutiny that had ripped it apart. Brask stood on the bridge now, knives at his belt, Syndicate coordinates locked into the navigation systems, and a grin stretched across his face like he had already won. The surviving rebels moved with frantic energy, sealing off corridors, sweeping the ship for any sign of Lila Voss. She was still hiding somewhere inside the freighter, out of sight, and every second she remained free twisted Brask's temper tighter. He had killed Kargath, taken the ship, and seized control, but until the girl was chained again, his victory was incomplete. In the burnt-out cargo bay, a few loyalists of the old captain huddled together, injured and low on ammunition. They knew Brask would kill them once he no longer needed them, but they also knew Kalen Voss was coming. For now, survival meant hiding and waiting for the chaos outside to swallow Brask's rebellion whole. Lila crouched in the shadows of a maintenance tunnel near the freighter's engine core, listening to the distant echo of boots and shouted orders. The air reeked of smoke and ozone, heat from the overworked engines humming through the metal walls around her. Her pulse pounded, but her mind was steady, calculating. Brask thought he was in control. He thought she was just a frightened girl running from armed slavers. He had no idea she was counting every step he took toward the Syndicate, every mistake he made, every man he sent after her who did not come back. Because Lila was not planning to survive by hiding. She was planning to win. Out in the void beyond the freighter, a ripple of hyperspace energy announced the arrival of Kalen Voss. The Retribution came first, a black dagger against the stars, followed by the rest of Kalen's fleet. Cruisers, destroyers, carriers bristling with fighters. The kind of force that toppled governments and ended wars before they began. Across the system, Syndicate ships froze as their scanners lit up with the incoming fleet's signature. Warlord Corps battle cruisers, lurking at the system's edge, pivoted nervously, their commanders cursing as they realized Kalen had arrived faster than anyone expected. Even the Senate ships, gleaming silver with their flags of neutrality, hesitated before moving to intercept, as if unsure whether they were peacekeepers or future corpses. On the command deck of the Retribution, Kalen Voss stood with his hands clasped behind his back, face carved from ice. He watched the tactical displays light up with hostile fleets, listened as Rhea listed numbers and positions in her calm, unshaken voice. Syndicate cruisers closing in on the freighter, she reported. Warlord Corps is holding back for now, but his ships are moving into flanking positions. Senate fleet approaching from the south quadrant. Looks like they intend to control the airspace before you engage. Kalen studied the board for a long moment. Then he said, "Open a channel to all ships." A single tone signaled the transmission going live across the system. Thousands of ears listened. Thousands of eyes turned toward the black warship at the center of it all. "This is Kalen Voss," he said. His voice carried no rage, no panic, only the cold precision of a man stating facts. "My daughter is aboard the slaver freighter currently heading for Syndicate space. She will be returned immediately. Any ship, any crew, any faction that stands between me and her will cease to exist." The channel cut. For a few seconds, the entire system held its breath. Then Syndicate cruisers accelerated toward the freighter, determined to seize it before Kalen could. Warlord Corps ships began to spread wide, circling like predators hoping to strike when Kalen was distracted. Senate vessels moved to form a defensive cordon, claiming to maintain peace but clearly waiting to see who fired first. Rhea watched them all closing in on the tactical map and said quietly, "They are not going to give her up." Kalen's eyes never left the freighter. "Then we take her." On board the slaver ship, Brask felt the trap closing but clung to his plan. He still thought the Syndicate would protect him once he delivered Lila. He still believed Kalen Voss could be delayed or outmaneuvered with enough ships in the way. As alarms blared, he ordered his rebels to sweep the lower decks, furious that the girl remained out of sight when Syndicate boarding craft were only minutes away. Lila used the chaos well. As Syndicate ships approached and Brask's men scrambled, she moved through maintenance shafts and smoke-filled corridors toward the auxiliary hangar. Her father's fleet had arrived. She had seen the transmissions on stolen consoles while slipping past patrols. She knew Brask was about to hand her over, and she knew what would follow if he succeeded. The Syndicate thought Kalen Voss was a problem they could handle. Lila almost felt sorry for them. Almost. The first Syndicate boarding craft slammed into the freighter's hull with a metallic roar. Armed soldiers in black armor poured inside, killing what was left of Kargatha's loyalists and linking up with Brask's rebels. Through it all, Brask strode forward like a man convinced history would remember his name, demanding the girl be found at once. They finally cornered her near the auxiliary hangar doors, half a dozen armed rebels blocking every exit. Lila stood in the center of the bay, blaster in hand, smoke curling from a cut along her cheek where shrapnel had grazed her during the mutiny. Brask stepped forward, grinning like a wolf who thought he had finally caught the rabbit. "Your father is too late," he said. "The Syndicate will have you now. And when he comes, he'll burn them before he ever reaches me." Lila looked at him for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "Maybe," she said. "But you won't be here to see it." Before Brask could respond, the hangar doors behind him exploded inward. Kalen Voss entered with the force of a thunderstorm. Black-armored soldiers from the Retribution poured through the breach, weapons spitting fire. Syndicate troops fell first, cut down before they could even turn. Brask's rebels broke under the sudden assault, some firing wildly, others fleeing toward the corridors only to be gunned down by Kalen's men already sweeping the ship from the other side. Kalen himself walked through the chaos untouched, his eyes locked on Lila. For the first time since her capture, her composure cracked. Relief surged through her chest as her father reached her, one arm sweeping her behind him without slowing his stride. But the battle was not over. Syndicate reinforcements were closing in on the freighter from all sides. Warlord Corps' ships moved into attack formation. The Senate fleet issued warnings to all combatants even as they prepared to fire themselves. And Brask, crawling behind a smoking console with rage in his eyes, wasn't finished yet. Blaster fire thundered through the corridors as Kalen Voss led his daughter through the freighter's collapsing interior. The rescue team fanned out around them, disciplined and precise, soldiers who moved like extensions of his will. Syndicate troops lay scattered across the hangar floor while the last of Brask's rebels fled deeper into the ship or died trying. Lila stayed close behind her father, eyes scanning the chaos with the same calculating focus he carried. Relief burned through her chest, but she pushed it aside. They were not clear yet. The Syndicate ships outside would not let this end so easily, and Warlord Corps' fleet was closing like vultures on the edge of the system. Kalen moved with steady purpose, his expression unreadable as they advanced toward the freighter's command deck. The man was a storm contained in human form, his soldiers obeying each curt gesture without hesitation. Lila caught glimpses of him between bursts of gunfire and falling debris. The same man she remembered from her childhood, the same man who had broken empires and ended wars, now tearing through her captors like paper. For the first time since her abduction, she felt something strange under the relief. Pity. Not for herself, but for everyone who had thought taking her was a good idea. Brask was not dead yet. He slipped through the smoke-filled hallways with a handful of rebels, rage twisting his face. The Syndicate soldiers who had promised him protection were gone, either dead under Kalen's guns or retreating toward their ships. The gold he had been promised would never come now. But Brask was not ready to give up. Kalen Voss might have his daughter back, but Brask would make him pay for it before this was over. He still had control of the freighter's main engines. He still had explosives planted across the lower decks. And he still knew how to turn this entire situation into a firestorm. Kalen reached the bridge first. His soldiers swept through in seconds, cutting down the last rebels holding the controls. Through the cracked viewport, the system beyond burned with activity. Syndicate cruisers were forming a blockade around the freighter, their commanders demanding Kalen stand down or be destroyed. Warlord Corps' fleet lurked at the edge of the fight, waiting for someone to weaken enough for him to strike. The Senate ships moved like nervous hounds, insisting on negotiations even as their weapons powered up. Kalen ignored them all. "Signal the retribution," he ordered calmly. "Prepare strike wings. If any ship fires on us, erase it." Rhea's voice crackled over the comm from the command deck of the flagship. "Acknowledged. Warlord Corps' fleet is splitting into attack wings. Syndicate reinforcements inbound. Senate still broadcasting orders for all parties to stand down." Kalen's mouth tightened slightly, but his voice stayed level. They had their chance to stand down. Before Lila could speak, the deck shuddered violently under their feet. A deep metallic roar echoed through the hull. Warning lights flared across the bridge displays. Brask's voice came through the freighter's intercom, sharp with fury. "You think you've won, Voss? This whole ship is wired to blow. You, your daughter, your soldiers, the Syndicate, all of you burn together. Let's see you win from the bottom of a crater." Kalen's soldiers moved instantly, scanning for the detonation signal, the trigger points, any way to stop the chain reaction Brask had armed. Lila felt the deck vibrate again as distant explosions rocked the lower levels. Smoke began pouring through vents where the first charges had already gone off. But Kalen Voss did not flinch. He keyed the comm with a steady hand. "Brask," he said, "listen to me very carefully. You are already dead. You just have to decide how much pain comes first." Brask laughed over the channel, high and shaking. "You don't scare me, Voss. Not anymore." Kalen's eyes shifted toward one of his soldiers at the sensor console. "Find him." They swept the ship's internal scanners, chasing Brask through the corridors as he triggered blast doors behind him. Each explosion rocked the freighter harder, the hull groaning like a wounded beast. Lila grabbed a fallen rifle and followed the soldiers as they moved out, her father leading them through fire and chaos toward the fleeing traitor. They cornered him near the engine core where the final detonator was wired into the freighter's primary reactors. Brask stood behind a wall of fire and smoke, rifle in one hand, trigger in the other, eyes wild as the soldiers advanced on his position. "One more step," he shouted, "and this whole ship goes up. I'll kill her, Voss. I'll kill all of you." Kalen walked through the smoke alone. His soldiers held position, weapons ready, but he motioned them down. The two men stared across the burning chamber, one calm, one shaking with fury and fear. "You already lost," Kalen said simply. Brask snarled and raised the trigger. Lila's shot hit him first. The blaster bolt punched through his shoulder, spinning him sideways before he could press the detonator. Another shot from Kalen's soldiers finished it. Brask collapsed without a word, the trigger clattering harmlessly across the floor. Kalen crossed the chamber, tore the detonator from its housing, and handed it to his tech crew with a single order to disarm every charge left on the ship. Then he turned toward his daughter. For a long moment, neither spoke. The battle outside raged on. Syndicate cruisers closing in. Warlord Corps' fleet ready to strike. Senate ships screaming warnings over every channel. But here in the smoking ruins of the engine core, Kalen simply looked at his daughter, his face unreadable. "You handled yourself well," he said finally. Lila stared back at him, blaster still shaking faintly in her hands. "I learned from the best." Outside the viewport, the Retribution moved into firing position. Kalen keyed his comm again, his voice carrying cold across the system. "This is Kalen Voss. My daughter is secured. Any ship that remains in this sector in the next 60 seconds will be destroyed." Some Syndicate captains hesitated. Some tried to stand their ground. None lasted past 60 seconds. The first strike wing from the Retribution hit like a hammer, tearing through the blockade. Warlord Corps' fleet scattered under the sudden assault, Syndicate cruisers breaking apart as Kalen's forces advanced without mercy. Even the Senate ships withdrew rather than test his threat. Minutes later, the sector was empty except for the wreckage drifting among the stars. Kalen stood on the bridge of the Retribution beside his daughter as the last enemy ships vanished into hyperspace. For the first time since this began, his hand rested briefly on her shoulder. "This will not be the end," Rhea warned quietly, watching the tactical map clear. "The Syndicate, the Warlords, the Senate, they will come again after this." Kalen's eyes stayed on the stars beyond the viewport. "Then we will be ready." Lila looked at the battlefield outside, at the smoking remains of the fleets that had thought they could stand against Kalen Voss. She felt the same cold certainty he carried, the same unshaken resolve. Because the galaxy had just learned two things. Kalen Voss was still unstoppable. And now his daughter was too.